Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you for being here with us this evening. I am here. My name is Lauren Peterson, Vice President of Community Engagement for the Mind Trust. And I just really want to thank each and every one of you for being here, because you could have been somewhere else. And before I really get started, I want to give our team, if you all could give them a hand for supporting and helping to organize all 4 of these. This is the last one. But we got some bad folks working in our organization. So thank you so much. So here with me is my wonderful friend, Mary Clark. She's the Executive Director of the International Marketplace Coalition, and she's our venue host for this evening. So I would like to turn this mic over to Mary.
Good evening. So I didn't really appreciate that comeback, so I'm going to try it again. Good evening. Oh, so much better. So much better. So again, my name is Mary Clark. I'm the Executive Director of the International Marketplace on this hand, and on this hand, the Executive Director of the Global Village Welcome Center, which is the museum and the event space that you're in today. I'm here to share with you that, one, I appreciate you guys having your event here. Lauren, as she says, is a dear friend of mine. But I'm here to just help people realize that if we spend a little time with each other, we get rid of looking at people's colors, start looking at the mind and the heart, we can do so much more together. I truly believe that when God created us, and if you don't believe in God, it's okay, I think. But anyway, I think. But my Creator made us all in His image. Did He not? And if He didn't, because He did, He still made us different. Because imagine if all of us looked like me, and if all of us were creating centers that celebrate everybody, how boring would this world be? He created us so that we could be doctors and lawyers and artists and whatever you desire to be. Don't have a whole lot to say other than when you're looking at your neighbor and the people at the table at you, stop looking at the color of their skin and start appreciating the heart that is within. Blessings to you all.
Get this party started, everyone. Again, I want to thank you all for joining us to here with us for Beyond the Bell. It's a community conversation about education, a collaborative initiative, critical K-12 education topics here in the Indianapolis community. This event is a series of 4 events we've hosted this spring. And these are strictly to inform and engage our communities on issues such as chronic absenteeism, the new iRead literacy legislation, the new Indiana high school graduation pathways. We also will share information with you in the breakout sessions on out-of-school learning. Thank you to our partners who have helped the Mind Trust, Empowered Families, host these conversations. Edna Martin Christian Center, Indy East Promise Neighborhood, John Bonner Center, Neighborhood Center, Cafe La Plaza, Faber-Card Glick Neighborhood Center, Shepherd Community Center, and the Global Village Welcome Center. If you haven't already enjoyed your dinner, it's catered by the Grub House, and those of you that have children and would like to escort them over to child care, you can do so now. If not, they can stay here and join this with you. So now, as I'm excited to introduce our moderator for tonight's event, the fabulous Dr. Patrick Jones. Dr. Jones is the Managing Director, CEO, Leadership Practice for Charter School Growth Fund. He is also CEO of Exponentia Prime, and he has some flyers on one of the booths over here, so make sure you get one, which aims to close the math opportunity gap by providing Black, Brown, and urban students with enriching and engaging high-level math learning experiences. Dr. Jones has worked at the Mind Trust and is a former school leader and founder of Tinley Preparatory All-Boys Academy. Welcome, Dr. Jones.
Sure. Thanks, Lauren. I appreciate you for the warm introduction. I'm excited to be here tonight with all of you all and excited to learn more about these topics from our esteemed panelists. Whether you're a parent, a caregiver, an educator, or a community member, thank you for being here tonight for this very important conversation. Just a note about the structure. There are two parts to this conversation. So first, there'll be a panel discussion with the panelists, and then second requires your participation. So there'll be breakout groups across the room so you can further discuss some of the topics that we talk about today. All right, at this time, I will introduce you to your esteemed educators and respected panelists. Our panelists are Stephanie Campos. Stephanie Campos serves as the principal of Enlace Academy, a K-8 IPS Innovation Network school on the west side of Indianapolis. Stephanie also plays an integral role as executive assistant and consultant to the Multilingual Education Reform Collective of Indianapolis, MERS Indy. She is a seasoned education leader with a strong commitment to equitable education for multilingual learners, fueled by her pride in her Puerto Rican heritage, Boricua, and find my place, and culture as a first-generation Latina. With over 15 years of experience in education, Stephanie has dedicated her career to fostering inclusive learning environments that empower students from diverse backgrounds. Stephanie's career has traversed various educational levels, from early childhood to high school. Welcome, Stephanie Campos. Next up is Dr. Tanika Holden Flynn. With nearly 20 years of experience in education, Dr. Tanika Holden Flynn has dedicated her career to serving students in elementary, middle, and high school in traditional public and public charter schools in Indianapolis and across the country. She is currently the executive director of Teach for America Indianapolis. Dr. Holden Flynn began her career as a high school social studies teacher in Prince George's County, Maryland, where she focused on increasing students' English language arts and math proficiency rates by maximizing instructional time and providing strategic intervention for students. Her efforts have led students at the elementary, middle, and high school levels to increase their grade level proficiency by 2 years in one academic school year. She contributes her success to building strong relationships with students, staff, parents, and community partners. Welcome, Dr. Holden Flynn. Last and certainly not least, this wonderful Black woman is Courtney Flukas. She's the Unified Student Supports Officer for Indianapolis Public Schools. In this role, Courtney is uniquely positioned to recommend, develop, and execute systems that eliminate systemic structural barriers to inclusive education and champion the strategic alignment of programming that promotes student belonging, safety, and positive school climate. Courtney served as the middle school English teacher, English department chair, and assistant principal in Central Indiana, where she also was named Teacher of the Year for MSD Washington Township in 2011. For the past decade, Courtney has also served as a teacher and a leader coach and professional development content creator for TNTP. Welcome, Courtney Flukas. All right. Well, now that we have our esteemed panelists with us, let's jump into these questions. So, Stephanie, we're going to jump right off the bat. Reading is the foundation of all learning. Let's help our audience understand how Indiana assesses third grade reading skills. What specific skills does the I Read 3 assess, and how do the schools you lead support or prepare students for this assessment? Help us understand.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would say there's 3 components I always tell parents. The first one is the foundational literacy for students to be able to understand the letter to sound correspondence. After students are able to identify the letter to sound correspondence, then where is the positionality of that sound coming from, beginning, middle, or end? That is the first portion of the assessment that students have to apply. Typically, our students get that foundational knowledge in K2 area grade level according to the Indiana state standards. The second component, they've changed the blueprint a little bit on us, but the second and third component is all about comprehension. Once students are able to decode a word or break down sounds in a word to be able to say them or read them, they have to then bring them together to get some understanding about what the text is actually about. Then they have to answer questions. Some are about real life things like an aquarium, animals. Do you understand that these are real things? And then some things are like fairy tales. There'll be stories that didn't really take place but could happen, and that's fiction. And so students have to be assessed on these skills. The state wants us to assess it in 3rd grade, but really the kids learn these skills up until 2nd grade. Recently, legislation has shifted, so now the students are now going to be expected to take the assessment in 2nd grade to then have to pass it by 3rd grade.
Thank you for that. You know, one of the things that, and I taught math for 10 years, so my reading instructional knowledge needs a little help, but one of the things I found in my research is that some of the best reading instruction occurs to help dyslexic children. Some of the same things you would do to work with dyslexic children to read, all children should have. Just wanted to know if Courtney wanted to add into that in terms of reading and how that looks for exceptional learners.
Certainly. We find that best practices for students with dyslexia or really any kind of divergent learning abilities is going to be best practice for all students. And so teachers can replicate those same skills and strategies so that then all students can benefit from them in a typical classroom environment or through pull out or push in support.
That's absolutely amazing. That's good. That's good news for the parents out here. I know as a young parent myself, when I was teaching my kids how to read, I had to research that and find that out for myself. So that's free game. Stephanie, schools and educators have ways to see if a student is struggling with the literacy skills, though, after you all have provided some support. So what additional support or resources do you use to know about students who are struggling with reading skills?
Yeah, so the biggest thing is the advocacy for parents. So every school does an assessment for your student at the beginning of the year, middle of the year, and end of the year. You have to familiarize yourself with what that assessment is. Through education shifted, NWA may ring a bell. Some schools have moved to iReady. And essentially what these assessments do for parents is to know what ability level their kid is performing when it comes to literacy, but there's so many things that we need to look at. It's the phonological awareness, those letter to sound correspondence, how students are able to decode those words to understand the vocabulary words and them in context, and then going back to that comprehension. And so as a parent, really pushing to look at what domain in literacy is your child truly struggling in, because you can't say, oh, my child needs help in literacy. What aspect of literacy? And so some schools do small group remediation where they may focus and target on that skill of kids not understanding that there's a short and a long vowel. So A makes 2 sounds, and when does it make the sound and why? And so that can be focused on in a small group, one-on-one, depending on the need. Each school is required also to do a dyslexia screener or flag for students for dyslexia within the first 30 to 90 days, depending on their assessment window. And you should receive a letter to say, this is the area that we as a school are committed to target instruction for your child. And then that's where you can take that information and say, I need more support because they are growing or are not growing, and what can I do at home to further that learning? And some of those assessments also have at-home packets. So you can get online, you can get on these applications to reinforce the learning that's happening at school. So the first thing I tell parents is, as much as we're doing at school, there is a connection piece from home to school that you can reinforce these skills as well. And so just knowing how to read those reports, what questions to ask, because that's going to be the most important.
Man, I'm just gonna say, if I get in trouble, can I just take you to the school with me? Because we gonna
Absolutely.
need.
I got you.
You got me? Okay,
got
we're
you.
gonna need the expertise,
I
because
got
I don't know nothing about what she just said, so I need you to come in, talk to her about my kids. Something that has a major impact on school is like, how do we do everything that Stephanie talks about if the kids aren't there? If we're having absentee issues. So when I think about that, what specific programs or interventions do schools use to improve student attendance, and how effective have they been? We'll start with Courtney Flukas.
Sure. So I think first and foremost, attendance is really a partnership between school and home. We know that when students feel seen, heard, and valued, they are more inclined to come to school. And so we have a responsibility as educators to make those environments such that students do feel that way. They feel that sense of belonging. And so when students aren't coming, then our responsibility is communication. So connecting with our parents, why isn't your child here? And as you may know, last summer, the legislation passed for students in grades K through 6 that if the student is on the verge of being truant, so missing 10 days of school for an unexcused reason, that is when a student is defined as being truant. When they are on the verge of that, we are to take action as educators. We are to ensure we are communicating with families. So at 5 days of an unexcused absence, you should be hearing from the school to say, hey, we need to create an attendance plan. We need to understand what are some barriers that you are experiencing in getting your child to school. How can we help? That is the point. It is not meant to be punitive. It is truly meant to be a supportive measure to ensure that whatever barriers exist, if the school can help in any way, that they are aware of that so that they can take action. And so I think your question is about what are some resources, what are some supports, and really in IPS and other schools, they're pretty exhaustive. So if you think about students that may be experiencing unstable housing, there are protections like McKinney-Vento. And that is a law that protects students so that they can continue to go to the school that they have always attended, regardless if they are moving throughout the city. And transportation must be provided. So you don't have to be concerned that the home is no longer in the school bounds. By law, the school is still required to provide transportation for your child. There are other services and supports that come along with McKinney-Vento. We can provide clothing, food, temporary housing, and so IPS partners with a number of community organizations to help with those supports because, as you can imagine, the funding has to come from somewhere, and the navigation of all the resources throughout the city can sometimes be complex. And so that's where our partners really help us in helping families to navigate those. We also have social workers or school counselors in every building, and so those are really your point people. They can help direct you to not only resources within the district, but also within the city. And so it's just a matter of the communication and ensuring that the school is aware that there is a need so that they can join hands with you and overcome that. Because if students aren't there, then they're not getting that excellent instruction that you've been learning about.
Look at that. For the whole community, there's this partnership aspect that has to exist for attendance to really improve and be sustainable for learning to happen in schools. Free game for educators, there has to be a system.
Yes.
When do we communicate and how do we communicate? We're going to get deeper into that. And then free game for parents, the school has supports for you through McKinney-Vento and other systems of supports. Mm-hmm. So definitely reach out. I know as a little bit about me, so I grew up in poverty in Compton, California in Los Angeles County. And one of my kind of darkest memories about poverty is when I had to stand in the food line in school and was handed food from my teacher. And one of the things, at the time I was really embarrassed, but as I got older, what I understand was I'm glad the school had that system in place, because the reality of the situation was my mother was raising us and we had very few opportunities to secure food in the house at times. And so it was just a great opportunity for the school to provide those things for our household. But let's talk more about the systems that are required for attendance to be track taken care of, make sure that students even have a chance at getting to school. So you said at 5 days this happens. Can you break some of those systems down for us?
Certainly, absolutely. So we know that we just talked about truancy, so that's 10 unexcused absences. But the state also monitors attendance for any sort of absence. So if a child misses 10% of school, or 18 days, since we are all going to school about 180 days or so, then that student is considered chronically absent. That could be, we're calling in because the child is sick, we went on vacation. So even if the absence is excused, if the child meets 18 days of absence, then they are considered chronically absent. In discussing the systems, every school district, I'm sure, but certainly in IPS, we have the postcards and nudges that go out to parents via text. We can see which parents and families have blocked IPS, as an example. I know we send a lot of phone calls, a lot of text messages, right? And so we might be over communicating in that regard, but you'll get those messages just to indicate, hey, your child missed a day of school. And what's helpful is if you put your child on bus that day, then that should alert you that there's something going wrong, right? So that's meant to be very like an early indicator that maybe the attendance was missed that day, or perhaps your child was in the clinic and didn't get counted in the attendance. And so those nudges are a part of the system to ensure timely communication. And then at 5 days, you should be hearing from a member of the attendance team. It might be a school social worker, it might be a counselor, an assistant principal. And again, they'll be inviting you in for a conference or to have that conference virtually. And that's just, again, to discuss what are the barriers, are there any barriers, how can we help, because we really want your child to be here. And then at 10 days, the child is considered to be truant. Now, I will say that even though the law is specific to students in grades K through 6, we really see the greatest number of absences at high school. So 9 through 12. We know students are working. We know students tend to have more autonomy at 9 through 12. And there are more distractions. Some cases they are getting themselves up, getting themselves to school. And so we're going to talk about high school graduation in just a bit. But again, if students aren't at school, then they are likely missing out on critical learning opportunities. And so while the systems exist K through 12, the consequence for absence is really for parents of students in grades K through 6. But it's equally as important for the older students to really get that push to go to school so that they aren't missing out on that key learning.
I'm so glad you brought up high school, because definitely, folks, if you haven't seen it, high school is just by far the greatest threat to student regular attendance in school. The other thing that I think high school brings up, well, first, one more thing on chronic absenteeism. If you haven't read it, the Mind Trust has published a report on chronic absenteeism in the city of Indianapolis and in the state. If you haven't read it, you can go to their website and read it. And I think it's a great read to get some great insights on what's happening with the attendance crisis in our city. But when we're talking about high school, one of the things that is of note for our community and our state as a whole is the graduation requirements have changed. And, I have thoughts on what that means. But Dr. Holden Flynn, can you help break down what is this new diploma? How does the new system work? How do our folks navigate it? Help us understand what's happening here.
Okay. So yes, I will do my best to break down this new system and how it works. So basically, as a starting point, I think our State Board of Education really wanted to be thoughtful about how do we have diploma options that are really meeting the needs of our students and making sure that they're prepared when they leave high school for whatever options that they want to pursue. And so I think as they started looking at data, we found that about 53% of students are actually going directly to college straight out of high school, right? Also, they show that between 2016 and 2021, the number of students actually going directly to high school had decreased, right? And so as a result of that, they thought through okay, what could we do different? And so what we've come up with is, preparing graduates prepared to succeed. So there are a few different options. So of course, before we were using the core 40, right, where everyone had to get their 40 credit hours, and that's what it took in order for you to get a high school diploma and graduate, right? So now the way that works is It's really kind of broken up into what happens in your 9th and 10th grade year, and then also what's happening in your 11th and 12th grade year. So 9th and 10th grade is an opportunity for you to really focus on all the basic skills and get all of the requirements that you need, right? So that you are prepared and you're educated on everything that you need, right? Math, science, social studies, all of those things. During that time, you also will really start to explore and figure out what it is that you're really interested in, right? So if you are someone that is really interested in maybe going to enroll into the military, your school should be providing more opportunities for you to learn about that. If you are interested in particular career paths, your school should be providing opportunities for that. And then also, if you are someone that is wanting to go directly to college, they should be providing opportunities for that. I think one of the things that is really important for parents to remember is that, when in high school, just thinking back to myself as a high school student, I changed what I wanted to do probably about 15 times, right? And I think that that is completely normal for kids to want to explore and learn about all different things. So it's really important to make sure that you have a great relationship with your student's high school counselor so that you can ensure that they are getting exposed to all the options, right? You don't want them to just do one track. Let them explore all the different things, right? And so as you then navigate through 9th and 10th grade, you kind of then start to decide which area am I going to focus on, right? So we have the 3 E's. You could be focusing on a diploma that is going to cause you to enroll, employ, or enlist, right? So you would be enrolling in college, you would be enlisting in the Army, or you would be getting a certification that would help you to go get a career right away, right? Also, as the State Board of Education was doing their research, they found that Indiana is actually ranked number 1 in terms of, number 1 in the country in terms of how many students are actually getting additional credits outside of high school, right, getting college credits while they're in high school. And so they had all these credits, but they weren't necessarily enough to go towards anything. So now we found a way to be able to take these credits and to actually have them to be applied to a certification. So students will be able to then earn that certification coming straight out of high school. I think another point that's really important for parents to remember is that students do have the option of enrolling in more than just one path, right? As I just shared a little bit ago, sometimes you might be interested in multiple things. So if you want to do multiple tracks, that is something that you should be advocating for your student to do and really understand what it's going to take for them to be successful to do that.
I think, this is an interesting concept because I think there's what the state is mandating for students or what the state is proposing, suggesting, however you want to call it. And then there's the state that certain communities are in. Mm-hmm. And I would posit this. I wonder if, and this is going to come to pass, how many students in some of our communities will choose college? I wonder what will be the choice pattern there. Then I wonder, well then because of that, how many accountants with actual CPAs will we have in our communities? People that we can hire from our communities. How many doctors will we have that are in our communities and from our communities? How many lawyers that we can trust will be from our communities and in our communities? I think there's a trickle-down effect that we have to be very careful about when we have something. And I say everybody should have a choice. I'm not trying to take away choices. I'm just saying this whole yo-yo of your kids should go to college, your kids shouldn't go to college, your kids should go to college, your kids shouldn't go to college, has been around for a very long time. And every time that yo-yo has been back and forth, I will say communities like the ones I grew up in and the ones I serve have always paid the negative price for some of those yo-yo decisions. So I think one thing that I would put out there to the community and folks here today is just watch out for that and make the decision that's best for your family. And know that folks with college degrees make $1 million more over a lifetime, statistically speaking, than people who do not. And that's not a knock on people who don't. Just about what type of life and what do we want for our children, and that's what we should be shooting for. Absolutely. Now, looking at struggling with math skills, Dr. Holden Flynn, I know we talk about that all the time. Lord have mercy, that math here. So schools and educators have methods to see if a student is struggling with math skills. With additional support or resources, do you use or know what resources or supports do you use or know for students who are struggling in math? And I know you all at Teach for America have some initiatives that you are running now.
Yes. We do have some initiatives at Teach for America, particularly looking at middle school math and looking at that gap, right? Because we know that students really should begin learning concrete math very early, right? And so just talking about students that are struggling, I think that would probably be my first point of advice, is to make sure that you're really getting math in front of your child very early. There are multiple ways to do that. There are an abundance of resources, apps that you can download that are free, early steps, just learning, making sure that your students are exposed to that and you're talking to them about what it is that they should be doing in terms of counting and understanding all of those things. I think the second thing that I would say in terms of students that are struggling is really pinpointing what it is, right? As Ms. Campos had shared earlier in talking about reading, you need to understand what it is that a student is not doing well in so that we can assist them with that. So as a parent, I think it's really important. I have a 5-year-old daughter who's in kindergarten, and really understanding what those academic standards are, the Indiana Math State Standards, so that when you're receiving documentation from the school, generally on a weekly basis, a newsletter will come out for parents, really looking at what those standards are and understanding how your child is learning those, right, so that you can be in conversation with the school about that and understand where they're at, right? Also, the school should be providing assessments throughout the school year for students and taking a deep look at those. And if you have questions, making sure that you're following up with the teacher and sitting down and really understanding what it is that your child is struggling with, so then they can help you to prepare a plan for them to move forward and to get better in that area. Also, a lot of schools are providing tutoring, high-dosage tutoring, and so you really want to talk with the school about all the options that are available to provide intervention. Also know what intervention is being provided during the school day for the student as well. All of those things are really important. And yes, I think math is just something that is really critical. I'm really excited about the House Bill 1634 right now, moving through the legislation. We really need to start prioritizing math in the same way that we do reading, right? We need to make sure that students do get those concrete foundation skills, and also that intervention is being happening in the schools at all levels, right? And then also it's really important that if a student leaves middle school and they're doing well, that they're able to move into high school, really getting into those advanced math courses. And so at Teacher America, we are spending time really trying to work with middle school math teachers to develop that skill set.
That's excellent. I'll throw in one more tidbit for families with young children, or for advocates of families with young children. There's actually been, what kind of study would I call this? This is kind of like an in-action study. So the teacher does a study within their own school that states that when students have really strong fact fluency, they almost at 96% rate are going to pass the state test. And the students who had fact fluency, that means they can do it quickly and get it right. The students who did not pass the state test who have fact fluency is because they had struggle with literacy, right? That means students in grades kindergarten through 2nd grade need to be able to add, subtract fluently. That means they're not figuring it out in their head. They just know that 5 + 2 is 7. They've memorized that fact. Sure, they need to understand the concept of how addition works, but when you're doing complex math problems, the 5th grade test is almost entirely application. I'm going to speak too much here, but it's a lot of application in the 5th grade I-Learn test. Once I'm doing the application, I can't be thinking about how addition works on that part of the test. I have to just know, right? And so in K through 2nd grade, this is some more free game. Pull the flashcards out. We go old school. Pull the flashcards out. Multiplication, once you hit 3rd grade, I said, teach them in 2nd grade, multiplication. Teach them early. I say, hey, so you can send them to exponential prime on the weekends. We'll teach them about Pascal's triangle and everything. Okay. Back up. Yeah, we do everything.
I just want to add one thing, for the parents and the families in the room. I don't think that there's an expectation that you become overnight masters of education, right?
For sure.
I think that you know your child well, and schools, it's their job to also know your child really well, what they are doing well, what they have mastered and what they have not. And so the communication is key. Ask questions. What can she do well? What can I reinforce at home? Or where is she struggling? How can I help build her skill set up even on my own time? That's not something that you should feel like you are having to research and spend hours and hours getting a master's degree on your own time, in that. Lean on the school to help give you that information and to provide you with resources so that you too can be partners in that.
Absolutely.
She just hit on what we're heading to next. Future. She can see it. Personalized learning plans. Very important to the education of a child. And we'll pose this to the entire group. How do I work with the school on understanding what's best for my child? How do I start to understand what's best for my child and put that plan in place so the school and I are partners in my child's success?
Well, Unified Student Supports is not only a department that supports the student services side of IPS, but also special education. So if your student has an IEP, or you know a child who has an IEP, that plan is meant to be the roadmap for educating that child. What does it take? What is the child strong at? What are the things that he or she enjoys? What are the ways that we can motivate the child to continue to grow? And then where are the goals? How can we help ensure that this child is meeting grade level expectations in each of his or her classes? And what kinds of accommodations and specially designed instruction are required in order for the child to hit that mark? So the goal of an IEP is not to lower the standard or lower the benchmark, but instead, what are all the tools and resources we need to put in place in order to rise that child up to still meet the standard? And so I would say, join those meetings. Don't be afraid to ask any question. It's got to make sense to you, or it's just words on paper. And be a strong advocate for your child. They deserve the very best of us. And that happens when parents and teachers are working together to develop a plan that truly meets the needs of the student.
Yeah. I will add that every student will have a personalized plan if they don't have a formalized or legalized plan like an IEP. And those start at the beginning of the year conferences. I will tell you, I'm friends with a lot of school leaders, and we go back and forth around, should we do 2 parent-teacher conferences or 3 parent-teacher conferences? And how do we meet our families where they need the information, and how do we communicate this to you? So your personalized plan starts the moment that we take those beginning of the year assessments and we sit down and talk with you about where your student is. And typically, if we don't see the growth that we want to see through those 6 to 8 week cycles, you'll see that in the report card. And so we may not have a parent-teacher conference around report card time, but that's a great opportunity to say, you told me my kid was at grade level when we took these assessments in the beginning of the year. Now my student is performing at a C level in October, right before October break. Tell me where the disconnect is. Is it schoolwork, or is it the grade level content that's being taught, right? And is my child not able to retain the information, which is typically what we see? And we need to monitor that, right? And that goes back to what Dr. Jones was saying. What can we do at home? A lot of it is fact fluency. A lot of that is just making sure kids are reading. And I think we've overcomplicated the simplistic ways that we grew up, where you read for 20 minutes a day, right? You do your math fact fluency. These are things that they can do at home that helps with that retention of information. And if you notice, and what I tell parents, by December, if you do not see your kid growing and no one's reached out to you, call me or call your teacher, because that is when we have to put a plan into place, which helps get to an IEP if we need to. And it's called the multi-tiered system, where all those intervention supports are in place. And we have to do that alongside you, where we create goals together so that you can hold the school accountable for the growth and progress of your child. So the more information you know about the process, the more that you can advocate. But if no one's explaining it to you, that's the role of your school leader and your principal to sit down and talk with you, or whoever they have overseeing that process. So ask for those meetings. That is our job, to ensure that we're providing a quality education to your child. And so you need to hold us to that.
So Dr. Holden Flynn, I'm going to take you in a different direction. So we talked a lot about how parents need to reach into the schools and say, hey, I need to reach out to you so I can see where my kid is. But where's the responsibility on the educators? What do educators need to be actively doing to ensure that the parents, number one, feel comfortable reaching out to them? And number two, if a parent can't be engaged, my mom worked all hours of the night. I didn't really see her in the evenings. And so she needed the school to reach out to her, even though she's a crazy lady. She did whatever she wanted, and she was going to get me in the school doing what I was supposed to do. But I digress. What does the school need to do to be proactive to support the students?
So I think there are many things that the school should be doing, right? And so I think the first step is, like I had shared before about that weekly newsletter that should be coming home. So that would be like at the elementary level, teachers should be sending home that information weekly so that you will understand what your child is learning in the classroom, right? At the high school level, that's going to look a little bit different. It actually might look more like a course syllabus where it goes through pretty much the semester, right? Or the quarter of what students should be learning. So that's the first step, right? So really having an opportunity to go through that and understand what's in that is going to help you to understand what your child should be covering in the classroom. So if you're not getting that, that's call number one to the teacher. When can I expect to receive this information? I really want to be informed about what's happening with my child. I think the next step is really just making sure that you develop that strong relationship. And so again, the teacher should be reaching out to you to establish that, right? So initially within the first weeks of school, at all levels, the teacher should be making a phone call, sending an email, sending home a letter where they have their contact information and telling you the best ways to be able to get in touch with them, right? So these are things that you should be looking for. And then if you don't see those things, definitely reaching out to the school because it really does have to be a partnership. And if we want our students to succeed, we have to work together.
I would add that most school districts utilize student information system like PowerSchool, Skyward. They may also utilize Schoology or Google Classroom so that the folks at home can not only know if there have been any discipline infractions or attendance issues, but then what's happening in the classroom. Is there a quiz this week? What was the homework, et cetera? And so many times we find that parents don't have the username or password. So ensuring that you have access to those platforms, you know what the platforms are, you know how to get on, and you know how frequently the school is committed to updating each of those spaces, I think is helpful.
And then also I will add, you mentioned about parents who don't necessarily have accessibility to come to a parent-teacher conference. I think it's really important to be flexible. And so whatever that looks like, if that means that, we need to work with our colleagues, that we can step out of the classroom to take a break to make sure that we are finding time to meet with that parent and get them the information that they need. Those are things that schools have to do to make sure we're working together. Absolutely.
Great call. Great call. So last question of the night. This is for y'all. We're getting ready to end the 24-25 school year. For our final question, what is one thing you learned this school year that will make you a better education leader moving forward?
I'm happy to start with that. So, in my role, I have the opportunity to work with many teachers, right, in several different schools and different types of school settings. And, I think it's so interesting when you go in that you see so many people are struggling with the same areas, right? So, for example, middle school math, across our state, that is an area where we really need to come together and kind of push people, right?
Yep.
In terms of absenteeism, in terms of engaging our communities and families, right? We see that across our community that there are many schools and teachers that are struggling with the same areas. And so I think what would really be helpful for me is to really be a conduit to take some of those best resources that are happening in certain areas and bring them to everyone so that everyone is able to use those resources to go to their classroom or to their schools and to improve what's happening there.
Thank you. Ms. Flukas.
Sure. I think that this probably plays on a bit of what Dr. Holden Flynn was describing, but what this year and in the last several years, especially since the pandemic, has taught me is that truly we are all stronger together. There's a lot of finger pointing that goes on in education, a lot of blaming, because kids are struggling across the board all over the nation, and everybody's trying to figure out why and how do we fix it. And, there's lots of reasons, right? And so what I find is that when we actually work together, we are able to identify what the barriers are. We're able to solve for the barriers. We're able to build partnerships that prioritize the student and the student's success and not anything else. And so I believe that I've learned and continue to learn daily that we are absolutely stronger together.
Excellent. Thank you for that.
I've been thinking about this for a while, but I think there's two things that come because I truly believe that you're not going to be able to impact the community that you lead without unlocking the heart of the families, but then also unlocking the heart of the students. And so this year particularly, just really being humble and being able to have those conversations that are hard to have with families, listening to our families and not assuming that we know what those barriers are, and always coming up with a solution for the family, because they don't need you to come up with the solution. They need you to listen and be there for their kid. And I think that the more you can get the parents to understand that you're their advocate, then they're going to advocate for their students. That was the one thing that I think was a push in our building this year that we were able to do, and it removes excuses that kids can't do it. And so that's the second thing I would say with education is give them the hard things. They are going to grow and they're going to prosper with those hard things. And when we think that, we have to make it easier or scaffold for them that they will get it faster. Really, we are minimizing their ability to greatness. And so I think that's a second thing where parents may say, well, how do I make it easier? There's no ease in anything that's going to be complex. We have to put it in front of you first. So, I think it's those two things that I've learned, that we have to build that trust before we can get the outcomes that we want to get in kids and families. And then it's a partnership, like everyone said already, around no more excuses. This is what they're able to do, and let's get them there.
I love that phrase, unlocking the hearts of the family. Did you make that up? Is that you?
I don't know. I have a lot of Stephanieisms out there, but the one that I will say I've been telling the kids is, I'm done playing school, let's do school.
Let's do school for real.
So the moment I see you, let's go.
I love it. So let's give our panelists a round of applause. Thank y'all for your expertise. Absolutely amazing stuff. And now we want to give time to the audience to ask some questions before we go to our breakout groups. Is there one? Is there one? Am I bringing the mic to him, Auntie? Oh, okay. Oh, I'm sorry. If there is one that wants to come to the church, right there at that microphone.
Dr. Jones, was this interpreted the whole time for the families?
I saw a couple here,
I just want to make
but
sure.
yes. Do we have interpreter? Let me check. Yes, ma'am.
First, want to say thank you to the panelists. This was extremely informative. I just have a lot of questions, but I'll ask the first one. What do you recommend, or what are you seeing as a support to deal with the children's nutrition and wellness? For example, a lot of children are coming to school and may not even had breakfast for the morning. And so when you think about doing a math assignment first thing in the morning and you're lacking nutrition, how does that correlate with the student's learning ability as well as ability to learn? And then the second one is, sorry to throw it out here, but what are we doing in regards to children's safety? We see it nationally that many of our children are not lacking the ability to learn, but they're lacking the safety to learn. Bullying would be one component that we're seeing across the globe that is impacting our children as well as their parents. And what are we doing to kind of combat that and deal with that?
Thank you for those questions. Who would like to start? We got safety and we have hunger.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in the schools day to day. We're all in schools in different capacities. But the two things I would say is, depending on your school corporation or district or even school, they do offer the breakfast for students. And so that's something that's automatically part of the day for our kiddos. And even if they are late, they should offer something for your kiddo. That's the first step of every day, is that nutrition focus. So I would say be curious. Ask that question. How are you serving, my student? What does this look like? What's the process, especially if they're late, right? So that's number one. My recommendation as a parent and as a school leader, ask that question. The second goes back to what we've been talking about around students having relationships. It starts with every adult in the building, not just their child's teacher. And so that is the biggest thing, is students need to find an adult, one, that they have the most combined trust in, but know that every adult in that space is a trusted person, and everyone's actions have to be replicated the same. So we do not tolerate bullying. How do we show that in our space? It's on daily announcements. It is in restorative practices. It is in students having to engage in difficult conversations like, you hurt my feelings when you said this. So be curious about how are schools disciplining and giving consequences to students. It shouldn't be punitive, it should be a learning experience. And you're gonna see that in attendance rates, right? So look at your school's attendance, because sometimes it's not necessarily because of transportation, it could be the safety and security of your kids. And so schools that have created and fostered that learning environment are gonna have higher attendance rates in their schools.
Excellent. Anybody else want to?
Yeah, I think one aspect of safety that I would, that comes to mind is that we notice across the nation, especially older students, with weapons, with fighting, and just like a general sense of not being able to manage conflict. And so as a district, we decided, we have a lot of conversations as adults, but we held a high school youth summit to talk to the students. Like, what are you experiencing every day? Why aren't you coming to school? Why are we seeing weapons or the fights? And, the answers that we received were pretty eye-opening. They are lacking connection. They aren't always having a trusted adult. They are avoiding coming to schools because they don't want to be a part of the drama, and because they don't necessarily have the conflict mediation skills, then it's like, I'll just avoid altogether. They're experiencing a lot of foolishness on social media that's bleeding its way into the school. But also they said in some instances they are bringing weapons because of, if they don't have transportation and they are walking or taking the bus, then it's for protection, And so in all of these regards, there's a different answer, right, for each of those different root causes as to why these things are on the rise. But I would say is that it's still about the partnership piece. If you feel unsafe coming to school, that's a conversation that we need to be having with your family so we can figure out a safe way for you to get to school that also doesn't bring a dangerous weapon into a school, right? Because our responsibility is to keep everybody safe. But I think just talking to students, especially the older ones, is critical in getting some of the answers that you named. And when we talk about restorative practices, like Principal Campos mentioned, that is critical because that is a life skill. That's something that transcends education and school, to be able to hold oneself accountable when we've done something wrong, when we've hurt someone, to build empathy, to understand that there are consequences to my actions. And sometimes it is just a restorative conversation needs to occur. And sometimes it is a punitive, consequence because there has been damage, to someone or something. And that is the most appropriate response.
Excellent. Let's move to the next questioner.
Thank you all panelists. Faye Dansby from Purdue University, Polytechnic in the School of Engineering Technology. I have some friends who are parents of a second grader who just took the iRead, didn't get quite to the score. But my question was, from the research I've done, the test can be administered either digitally or on paper. And so again, this student had been given all this material on paper to be practicing and getting prepared, had mastered doing process of elimination, but when he gets the test, it was on the computer. So is there a way that parents could ask to do it on paper for their child, and is that available and possible to do?
Yeah, I can tell you that it's requested. You are going to have to request that with you would have to speak to an administrator, and then what they're going to do is send you to the testing coordinator to figure out how to make that possible for that student. And sometimes it could be in a legal document like an IEP because that's an accommodation. Sometimes it could be a Section 504 because of anxiety or test anxiety. So they have to determine that based on the need of the student. So your best case scenario is reaching out to the school administrator to schedule that meeting to figure out what's the best route for that.
Would they have to have one of those documents in order for that to happen? Because I don't think they have either.
That's a really good question. I can't answer that specifically right now, but from my understanding in the past, you were able to make that decision, but I know that there's tight legislation that's going around of how it has to be assessed, and it's been on the computer because portion number 1 for iRead is a video that the kids have to listen to, and it goes back to the accommodations for students where they have unlimited access to listen to that video to answer those questions. And in the past, when we were able to administer that test paper pencil or the kids were doing it, teachers or the facilitators were only able to repeat 3 times. So that was a big push with the way that the test was redesigned. Okay, yep.
Yes, please come.
First of all, thank you so much for having this super important conversation. I wanted to just make a comment. My family's from Mexico, so I get to watch a lot of my cousins go through the school system there. And it was interesting when you guys were talking about the way that the law is changing for high schools and the path to careers and stuff. It looks very much like Mexico and what they're doing down there. So that was really interesting. And then I also definitely agree with what you guys said about it has to be a partnership. A lot of the families that I work with, when they're shocked when they get their report cards and they're like, oh my gosh, my kid has a C or a D. That's when I tell them, you have to go and ask, at every parent-teacher conference, how many assignments were given and what assignments did my child turn in and what assignments did they not turn in, so that they can definitely find out, why it is that they're not doing so well. So that's always just a tip that I give, and thank you so much for all the work that you do.
Oh.
Thank
And I would
you.
just encourage, to utilize the platforms that are accessible, because sometimes by waiting until the end of the quarter is too late. They may have missed a ton of work, right? And so as frequently as the parent can be aware of missed assignments or poor performance on a test in class, you want to be responsive as quickly as possible to try to correct it.
We have any other questions? I mean, it's not very often you got people of this caliber up here now.
I don't think I need the mic. How do you deal with the issues? I'm working with a lot of parents that are struggling with behavioral issues. I work with predominantly girls, and so we're starting to see a lot of mother-daughter breakdowns. And so how do we navigate that? If parents are having issues with their children at home, may feel they cannot discipline their children. Children are feeling that if they do get disciplined now, they want to run away. How does that impact when you go to school? Because there's a lot being said about what the parent should be doing, but what about if the parent is struggling with the same child that you're struggling with in the classroom?
Well, I'd say more often than not, that is the case. That we are all struggling and nobody has figured it out. But what we recommend most often, obviously depending on the case, is that we have so many resources as it relates to mental health and just general wellness. And so in some communities, some families, they look at therapy or receiving support from a life skills specialist as, there's some stigma around it. But what, in our experience, we have found that when parents are willing to go and join the therapeutic services with their child, or even placing their child in the therapeutic service, then they have a greater opportunity to build some of the skills that either aren't necessarily being modeled at home, or because the child is, different from the parent, and they might need a different style of discipline or accountability or what have you, that it's this third party that has all the education and training to give the parent and the child tools for everyday life. And so I think we have to take advantage of those resources and not be afraid to allow ourselves to open up to these third parties, understanding that they really can offer great benefit.
I would just add to that I think it kind of goes back to that partnership, right? So once you receive those tools, then really kind of working in tandem with the school so that we're utilizing those same resources together, so that whatever, rewards are happening at home are also happening at school, and that we're kind of all on the same page and reporting out about what's happening consistently so that we can move forward together.
Awesome. Any other questions? Yeah, there we go.
Okay, I'm a parent and I'm an educator. So how much will schools work with me? Because I know the system. I have my own teaching philosophy. I wish I could homeschool, but I'm a professional. And sometimes I worry about that balance because I know how it is to have a parent that is like me. But also, like, I know that there are so many different ways to teach a child, and teachers have their own way, right? So I'm nervous about my 5-year-old going to kindergarten. So what is your suggestion for someone like me working with wanting more family engagement and being able to be like Barack Obama, who was homeschooled at 5 a.m. and went to school too?
I have a unique challenge. I am the school leader of my child. So not only am I a teacher, but I'm my child's principal. And so I can empathize with that sentiment because my child's in my school, and I would love to discipline my child the way that I want to discipline my child, right? I think the biggest thing I would say is that initial connection at back to school night. Really introduce yourself and get to know that teacher and let them know how you parent at home and what you want to see out of your kid and have an aligned goal for communication, right? It's gonna be okay because kids learn differently. And as much as we try to instill this mindset of how school's supposed to be, our kids thrive in different environments. So I would really challenge you to make your expectations clear about the academic expectations you have for your child and what you want to see at the end of the year. The communication you want to see with your teacher, right? And then from there, see what happens. But allow your child to be in an organic environment that's not controlled because you are controlling that environment at home. And what we don't want to see, I said welcome to the team because we saw our kids on Zoom last night as we were talking, right? We're educators and parents too, is we want them to love education as much as we loved education. And we don't want to withhold that love for learning because we're trying to control everything and what it's supposed to look like. And that's where that perfectionism is gonna come from. That's where this social emotional, you're gonna see more defiant behaviors because we're doing too much instead of letting it organically happen.
100% agree. I'm also a parent, and your child is going to have to learn to navigate hard things, and you're still the parent at home, and he or she is going to bring those lessons with them to school, and you and this child get to learn to advocate for what they need together.
It takes a village. So we can't say to our families, it takes a village if we're not honoring our own advice to our families.
Well, he loves,
I took us to church.
he loves
That's two.
to learn now. So I'm just hoping that he will continue to love to learn and not be so rigid. Because that was another thing I wrote down about recess. You know, it's so short. It's like 20 minutes. I'm like, and you know, they're so young, and sometimes the schooling is just out. Sometimes for younger children, it's outweighing their childhood. So that's
100%.
All right. Give everybody a hand for these great questions. This has been absolutely amazing. We are going to now head to our breakouts. And so here are the locations for folks. Just so you know, we're in 4 corners over here. So is that, you had a question?
Come on up.
Hold on 1 second.
Dr. King,
We got room for one more? All right. No. Come on, brother. We got room for one more.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
That's right. That's right.
Thank you for this opportunity for parents to come and speak out. I'm a parent. I'm also an educator as well. And I had 2 questions. But I'm also a parent to all the students as well, filling in that gap, so it does take a village. But I had a question. It was, is there a timeline on education? Is there a timeline on education, like literally? When the school is open and the expectations for that school to be consistently open? Is it a timeline for production or, for children to have this certain grade level and this school should have these sixth graders, these fifth graders, these fourth graders should have this percentage of growth.
Y'all got a staff.
So I want to make sure I'm clear on what you're asking. Are you saying like a timeline in which how much growth a student should make? Like, what is the frame in order for them to do that? Or is that the question? I'm not quite following.
For the government, who's over the education system for a school. So we know it's plenty of schools in Indianapolis, right? And we know our children, a lot of our children in the communities are struggling, you know, from trauma, from a lot of stuff, right? Parents in prison, on drugs, a lot, you know. So, of course, the kids go to school and they struggling and they behind. Right. So the expectations for this school system because it's almost like, and not trying to be in a negative way, but it's almost like I don't care about the struggles of the family. We need to see some data, right? So what I'm saying on the other lens, not our lens, but on the other lens is saying, hey, by this certain time, we need to see some data. Is it a timeline set from the high ranking for schools in our community?
So I think what that makes me think of, right, is the legislation in terms of students like being able to pass assessments, right, by a certain time. And if you haven't passed it by that point, right, then they are in danger of being retained, right? I think along with that, though, like if you read the law, there really should be several opportunities for students to receive intervention and support so that we're not getting to that point. However, like just based on your question, yes, we could get to a point where if a student has been tested several times, they've been given resources, and they're still not passing an assessment, then they may be in danger of being returned.
Okay.
Excuse me, of being retained.
Now, what about the opening of the school? Is it in danger of staying open?
So I hear you as,
that's what I'm saying.
I think your question's more about school accountability for student outcomes.
Okay.
Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Well, we're rolling out a new report card. I think it's this year, right?
I think it's going to be proposed soon. Yep.
Yeah, so this is a thing too, right? We just pray over, you know, the decisions that get brought to us as educators. It's about advocacy and you knowing what's happening so that this voice, your voice that's standing right here, is also standing at that state house and standing there with your legislators and really pushing for that level of accountability, because that's what it comes down to. The beautiful thing, in my perspective, of Indianapolis is this choice, right? And so when we think about the innovative charters, the charters, their accountability is different than most schools. And I think that that's something that gets missed around, we have to turn in our data every quarter, right? My school has to turn it in to the state every quarter, versus some schools don't have to do that until 7 years pass and they have a 0% I-Learn score and they've been operating, right? So as parents, as community members, as educators, when you are choosing schools to work for, you track that data to see what are those schools pumping out, what test results are they pumping out, and what is that school leader's accountability, not only to the families, right? I don't want to lead a school that has these outcomes. So what is that school doing differently? What is that advocacy looking like without needing someone to tell me top down, you have 2 years to turn your scores around. I don't need someone telling me that, because I got into education to make sure that I'm providing a quality education for these kids, and I'm going to go to bat for that. So I think that that goes back to guidance. It's your internal guidance as a school leader, as an educator, as a community, until those guidelines get provided for us.
I'm going to add something to that. I'm going to say, like, one, we can't conflate education and schooling. They're two separate things. So what we do here is schooling. We provide a conduit or a vehicle for education to happen, but education happens all the time. I just learned a new definition of a sphere last week, right, as a math teacher. So education is constantly happening. Schooling is a place or a conduit where education can happen. The other thing I would say is, and this may be a little controversial, school is the only thing we don't take seriously. If we were having a conversation with a football coach, If the football coach is not producing for his team, that football coach is going to be fired. That's just what happens. That's how it works about everything else but school. And I'm not trying to blame educators here. I'm just being realistic about how the rest of the world works versus what we think about schools. And so I do believe that we have to understand that kids have to be educated, and there are some real complications that come with that because we are real people with real challenges, with relationships with each other, and that makes things very difficult. And at the same time, we cannot be afraid of accountability, of not being able to serve our community well. We're going to have to step up, and that's just what the job calls for.
Let me add one more piece to that too. Your child's experience in a school is what should matter to you the most. The school could be successful and your child be failing. And so that's unacceptable, right? And so I think the power of choice is understanding what your choices are and then enacting that choice when you see that it's not a good fit for your child. And if you need advocacy in navigating all of the options that are available to you, then there are plenty of resources available to support with that.
We have reached our time boundary, but I will tell you what, very happy to continue these conversations in the corners. I will also make myself available if that's helpful. I'll step down from here because I'm not a part of the corner conversations. Okay. But we are headed to our corner conversations.